is I'm going to show you some very interesting stuff that might be a little bit complicated, but if any of you have done programming, remember this is the advanced classes now, so we're going to do some. If you have done programming before, this might make sense. If you haven't and you are very unsure about it, don't worry. You don't have to use these things, but they're really cool. So what I'm going to do, I'm just creating a new comp. I'm going to add let's start off with a solid over here. So in After Effects, you might remember me saying that you can use a thing called expressions. Expressions are basically programming. So let me show you the power of expressions. I've got one that I'm going to copy paste in here. What I'm going to do is basically the same thing that I had before. I'm going to create a animation of the position. So I'm going to go from one position to another, like the little bounce thing or something. So these are the keyframes we've got. It goes downwards, upwards, downwards. Very simple, nothing special over there. What I'm going to do though is I'm going to press the Alt key or the Option key on this property, so the position bar on the stopwatch. If I hold the Alt or the Option key and click on the stopwatch, you'll see that we get a sort of a window over here pops up and the values change red. And what it's saying is transform.position. So that is this, it's the transform.position, but I'm going to replace that with some code. So if I open this up, don't worry, you don't have to understand what this says. So here, what I've done is I've pasted in an expression over here. Basically, it is using this code over here to change the keyframes for the position. So if I now play back the animation, it's going to use this code and adjust the keyframes and the position values over here based on this code. We've got a keyframe, and then it goes downwards. And when it reaches the bottom, it's got a whole bounce animation in there. So this is called the inertial bounce expression. If you're interested in working with the expressions, just search for After Effects expressions. Here are some cool ones in this link over here. So this is the School of Motion again, which is a cool website which does a lot of After Effects stuff and other animations. Basically, they just give you a bunch of little links, little expressions over here that you can paste into different things. So this is a really complicated one that I've got in this one, so the inertial bounce. But basically what it is saying is taking the amplitude, frequency, and decay and adjusting the values by them. So if I adjust the amplitude over here, so amplitude, and let's make this 20. So the amplitude is the strength. So now this should make this bounce thing a lot stronger over here. So the little bounce is bouncing a lot more. So let's make this even stronger. And let's make the frequency even higher. So let's go make this 8. So this will be 8 times faster. So now we're going to get a way stronger and bouncier sort of thing. And that's even too strong. But you can see how you can really have cool things from this. It almost sort of looks like a spider web sort of jiggling or something now. And that's with just 2 keyframes and this expression. So you don't have to know exactly how it works, but if you just copy paste different expressions into things and you have like a library of different expressions that you want to use, you can have some cool effects there. And if you want to learn programming, you can figure out how to do these things. This is actually really simple. It's just if statements, taking a keyframe, using the values and multiplying it by the velocity and the frequency and doing some maths on that. And just changing the output value of it. That was a super complicated one, but let me just explain in a simpler way how this works. So I'm going to create a new solid over here, just with a different color. So we've got a red layer over here. I'm just going to delete the expression in there. So we've just got the keyframes of the blue one moving over there, and I'm just going to move the red one somewhere else. So the blue one just moves down, nothing fancy over there. Remember how I would say if you want to use the same values for something, for the position of something, you would parent it. So if I parent the red one to the blue one, it will use these same values. Let's say we want we want to do this, but we don't want the red one to move horizontally. So I just changed the X keyframes on the blue. So at the moment it is moving downwards and to the right. But let's say we don't want the red one to move to the right as well. We just want it to move down. So if we go to the position of this and we turn on the expressions, now you'll see it saying transform.position. What we can do is we can use the pick whip in the expression over here. So the pick whip, like you would use for the parenting, we can drag that onto a different thing here. So say we want to use only the Y position of this value over here. So we're dragging the pick whip onto the Y value of the other layer's position. So it is saying this layer is giving its little code over here. It's taking the layer of blue solid 4 position 1. So that is the Y value. It is not doing that. We want to say transform dot position 0. So what I'm doing over here is I'm saying I want this one's position to be its current X values and then use the other layer's Y value for the, I misspelled it, that's why. That's the issue with programming. You've got to check your spelling. I said transform instead of transform. So now what we've got over here is, it copies now the Y value from the blue layer, but it keeps its own X value. So we can animate this red square, but it will only move along the X value. The rest of the time, it's going to take the Y value from this one. So it can be a cool way to get these sort of interesting animations of things sort of keeping place with another object without having to animate these keyframes yourself. But you can then sort of link up these things and take positions and values from another thing. So if you remember, one of the first things I showed you when we were working with positions is things like I had a text layer that was showing the positions of things. So if I show you over here, we've got the source text. If I turn on the expression over here and pick whip, I can get this to show a value in here from another one. So this is now showing the X position of the blue solid over there. Or I can have this as saying position plus this. So now the text should say, just give me a second. So now it's text position plus that. So you can get some cool things of copying values and stuff from other things to get like this interesting sort of techno-babble animations with values and graphs or whatever in there. So you can get like Iron Man HUDs and all that sort of stuff. If you don't like the amount of zeros over there, you can do something like opening up your expression and then saying we don't want it to have all the little decimal values over there. So you can select this and you can say, I want this to be, where is it, math. We want to do a rounding or something on this. Math.round, I think it would be math.round.value for that. So if I round up that value, so we're saying position plus the rounded value of that. So now we've just got the solid number for that. I'm just showing you possibilities of things that you can do with this. Don't worry if you don't understand all this, but expressions can be super powerful for doing things in After Effects. So let me just show you one or two other things over here. So let me see. Oh yeah, so something that's really simple that you might want to use and I think I'll finish off with the expressions with this, is the loop expression. So if we have, I'm just going to add a new layer in here. So here we've got a little red solid. I'm just going to put an animation of, so we've got this layer that moves to the right. Let's say you just want to repeat that throughout your entire animation. What you can do is you can add an expression for this for loop out. I think you need to have it with capitals. So it gives you prompts and stuff when you're typing. So capital letters and stuff do make a difference. But what you'll see now is this plays. As soon as the keyframes are over, it just repeats all those keyframes for the entire duration of the rest of your animation. So this is a nice way if you've just got a little background animation or something that you don't want to have to animate 50 times throughout your animation. It will now just repeat those keyframes throughout the entire animation. So imagine like a tree with keyframes for rustling leaves or something. You can animate a sequence of that and then just add a loop out to that, and it will repeat throughout. Just make sure that the start and the end, in that case, if you want it to look good, doesn't sort of have this sort of jerking motion that I've got over here. If I just add the first keyframe to the end over there, this will loop smoothly backwards and forwards between the two keyframes. So the nice thing about expressions is that they always act on what you already have there, so you can change these things and it will always update based on what is in your keyframes. So expressions are super powerful. I would say Google them, have fun with messing with all of them. If you look in the drop down over here and the expression menu over here, you can see that there are tons of different things you can work with, and you can do really powerful things. So I'm going to show you just some practical use cases, and then we'll end up today's lesson. So I'm going to go to the camera movements thing over here. So this is the example that I had with the camera. I'm going to show you two things. So we've got the dolly camera over here, and we've got this sort of focus animation on here. Last time I showed you how to focus onto a different point. So if you select the camera and you want to focus on like the zoom text, you can select the camera, control click on the other layer and say camera, set focus distance to layer. And now we will focus on that specific layer. We've just got a really strong blur on this. So if we just turn that down, we'll see now we've focused on you can use that to focus on different points. But what's really a lot more powerful is if you create a null object. So if I go into the two views thing over here, and I'm going to add a new null object, make it a 3D layer. So this, if we just drag this into place somewhere over here, we can see the null in the 3D view. What we can do is we can select the dolly camera and the null object. And if we right click on that, we can say camera, instead of set focus to layer, we can link focus distance to layer. So now you'll see what this has done is adding an expression to the focus distance to basically say, using this expression, the focus distance will always be on that null object. So if I now animate the null object moving around through space, the focus distance will always be on that null object. So you can animate the null objects moving through the scene and it will always focus on that specific point. So you can have really nice smooth animations, especially when you've got let me rotate this camera maybe so you can sort of see. So I'm just giving a really oblique sort of view on this zoom text over here. If you were to just say set focus distance to layer, it would just set the focus distance to the anchor point, which is that bottom left-hand corner of this text. But if we use this null object as the focus linked point, what we can do is we can animate the focus distance to move across the zoom text and get this sort of rack focus effect of focusing across the object. And you can get a lot of precision on this and focus on a very specific point. And that's a lot easier than going into the focus distance and manually changing this value to be a different thing at different points. So you see how this is a built-in feature, but it automatically creates an expression. So this is based on expressions to create this effect. So the last thing that I want to show you is under here, we've got this wiggle and handheld text over here. So this is to use, you can use this expressions and various things to create sort of random motion. You see how the camera is sort of not smooth, but it's sort of wobbling around as it moves around. So that's using a thing called wiggle to create a sort of fake handheld effect of moving the camera around. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to open up the exercise file for this. So this is where we don't have the camera motions in here, are sitting over there. And you'll see that the one layer, the wiggle layer, is sort of jiggling around. So I'm just going to add a new camera on here, and we're going to move that to look at this section over here. So there we've got wiggle, which is the text that's just jiggling around for some reason, and then we've got text saying handheld. So if I select the text that's wiggling around over here, and if I press U to open up all the change things, we can see that the position for this text is wiggling around based on an expression called wiggle. What this does is it basically takes the current position of that text and it applies this wiggle expression, which just moves it around with a random value using these controls over here. So there's wiggle, and then we've got, I think it's amplitude and frequency, or it might be the other way around, but I think it is. So if I change this to be 15, we'll see that it's wiggling a lot more, and then the frequency, if I lower that down, okay, no, it is amplitude. So the frequency is the first number. So if I put that at 5, so that's 5 times per second. And then if I put it 100, 100 is the amplitude. So that is the amount of position it can change by. So that's the maximum motion. So the wiggle is now super crazy, and 5 is the amplitude, so that frequency. So that's how often in a second it happens. If I put that to 0.5 wiggles per second, it'll move less often, and then the amount of wiggle is this value over here. So if I put that to 10 pixels, we got a little softer sort of wiggle over there. So you can apply this to absolutely anything. So if we put this onto the camera, let's put keyframes on the point of interest and the position. So let's just move the camera around. So I'm just putting some keyframes on here for moving the camera. So the camera just smoothly moves over here. But if we want to create this handheld effect of, just more natural motion of like a person was holding a camera, what we can do is we can add the wiggle effect to the, in this case, maybe the point of interest, because that'll just change what we're looking at a little bit. So if we change that and we add an expression here, so I'm holding an Alt and clicking on the stopwatch, I can add wiggle, open brackets, and then we can do frequency. So let's do 1 wiggle per second for, let's try 10 pixels. So now this will adjust every frame based on this expression, and you'll see that there's a little bit of wobble into this motion. So maybe we want it to be a little bit stronger. So let's do 3 wiggles per second for 20 pixels. And now you'll see that you've got this really strong sort of shaky wiggle effect, like someone was holding their camera for this sort of, but all those sort of handheld camera effect movies. And it can feel a lot more natural for just the camera to have a little bit of motion to it. This is probably a bit strong, but there's a little bit of motion in there and it just sort of feels natural. You might just want to adjust the values and stuff to get that a little bit different. Yeah, you can add that wiggle to basically anything. When you're using the wiggle, I recommend you using the wiggle expression, because you can always then go change your keyframes and it will still add this expression throughout. The only annoying thing is then that this expression is applying to the entire comp. So it is applying it everywhere. So before and after the keyframes, it's always going to have this. You can use other more complicated expressions to have this only happen in different specific times. If you just want to create a really quick wiggle effect and you don't think your keyframes will ever change, you don't have to use the wiggle expression, so you can just delete that. There is also a window over here for wiggler. So under window wiggler, we can turn that on, and then we get this little panel over here that appears that we can then just apply a wiggle to specific keyframes. So I'm just selecting these point of interest keyframes, and we can do a frequency of 5. Let's make this really strong, 40 pixels, and we can apply. And you'll see what it does. If I zoom in over here, it adds keyframes based on the settings that we do over here. The only problem about this is, since it's adding keyframes, this wiggle is sort of baked into your animation now, and there's nothing you can do to easily edit them. You would have to go and sort of delete these keyframes and re-add them or manually change these. So that's why I say you would rather want to use the expression for wiggle. So yeah, expressions are super powerful. They can be complicated if you're not sure what they do. I would say have some fun, Google all these expressions and apply them to layers and try different things. So that link I sent you has a few different ones. YouTube will have a whole lot of different other examples that you can try out. And yeah, expressions are powerful. So first lesson of advanced stuff that we cover. Tomorrow we will do some really cool stuff with tracking and camera tracking and taking video and overlaying effects onto it. So hopefully you look forward to that, and I'll see you tomorrow. Alrighty. Yeah. And I'm sorry for the annoying things with the first lesson in advanced stuff, with working with expressions and the graph editor, and they're really powerful, and hope you have fun with them. I'll see you in the next one.